Blech. Cursed, directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson. You have the pedigree. You have the pedigree of the Scream franchise, right? The first Scream movie. Everybody who was involved in the making of Scream that made Scream great behind the camera was involved with Curse. Okay. It was touted. It was supposed to be the Scream of werewolf movies, right? That's how I remember there was so much hype around this. We're like, Wes Craven's going to do for werewolves what he did for slashers. And, you know, Wes Craven in each decade sort of, I don't know if reinvented is the word, but he made a damning impact in some way, shape, or form in 3 decades, right? In the 70s, he did it with Hills Have Eyes, or some would argue with Last House on the Left. In the 80s, he did Nightmare on Elm Street, which was, I mean, and in the 90s, he did it with Scream. So now we're in the 2000s. What's to say that he's not going to do it with Cursed? You know what I mean? So, you know, and he's doing it through Dimension. He's got Patrick Lessier, I think is his name. He's the editor. You got the same guy who's doing the score, and you have Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven, literally the creative team behind Scream. It's perfect. It's friggin' perfect. So how could this movie turn out the way that it did? And man, like we could do a whole, I think we might, we could do a whole deep dive on what happened to Curse and how it happened. Short nutshell version for this review. Cursed was 90% of Cursed was shot and then scrapped. They scrapped 90% of the movie and went back and they did three or four reshoots, okay, over 2 years. And in that time, Christina Ricci's character and Jesse Eisenberg went from being strangers to being brother and sister. Skeet Ulrich, who was like the love interest of Christina Ricci, he gets cut out of the fucking movie, you know. You have a really young Milo Ventimiglia, whatever his name is, great actor. He's in a lot of stuff. He's in this movie. You got a lot. There's a lot of people in this movie, actually. Shannon Elizabeth, Joshua Jackson, which is interesting. Really sort of, it's a transitionary time, right? Like those people were like relics of the 90s who were on their way out, but yet still sort of included. They probably thought, oh yeah, Shannon. I mean, at this point, when they were shooting with Shannon Elizabeth, it was 2003 and American Pie was 2000. That's when Shannon Elizabeth blew up, obviously, right? So it's kind of like she was really hot for that moment. I mean, Shannon Elizabeth was everything, everywhere at that time, right? So the idea of folding her in, and the movie eventually did come out in 2005, and they cut it to shreds. They cut the thing to shreds. Went from being a rated R movie to PG-13. Rick Baker, who did the, American Werewolf in London makeup, all of his practical stuff was cut and they used a CGI werewolf and it looks terrible. But here's the beautiful thing about watching Cursed, and I really enjoyed watching it. And I thought that I had never seen it before, but you know what? I was watching it and I realized, oh, I have absolutely seen Cursed before. I have seen it before. I think I caught it on TV at some point in time. I had such a crush on Christina Ricci at this time. She's so beautiful. Let me look at her. I mean, I don't know, something about her, but you'll notice, look at her eyebrows. This was such a thing in the early 2000s when girls plucked their eyebrows until they were these thin lines. And it was really, I mean, looking at it now in 2 decades removed, it's like really like unnerving and just kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say the word gross, but yeah, kind of gross. But at the time, this was like the rage. This was the rage. And it was like an aesthetically like appealing choice. And her hair is all weird. And it's interesting. You can see Jesse Eisenberg's hair. This was Jesse Eisenberg. He was just coming up, right? He's just starting to make a name for himself, make a splash. And obviously, I think he really started to come out of the woodwork with like things like Zombieland, right? And what else did he do? And eventually go on to play Lex Luthor. And he was in The Social Network, right? I think The Social Network was his big breakout movie. But you see his hair change in the worst kinds of ways. Like you can tell when they shot certain things based on Jesse Eisenberg's hair. And like I said, Christina, she looks beautiful, beautiful, beautiful in this movie, apart from her weird sort of eyebrows. Look at the poster. The poster is even also supposed to be kind of a takeoff of the Scream poster a little bit. And obviously the movie was destroyed. It wasn't Wes Craven's fault. He did the best. He did the best that he could with what they had. Michael Rosenbaum was in it. He was from Smallville, right? And he's also in The Divide. I think is he in The Divide? I think he is in The Divide. I'm going to check that right now. Pretty sure he's also in The Divide. Could be wrong. Could be wrong. He's in Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He's an urban legend. I mean, yeah, he was like one of those 90s. It's so weird when you look at like, you know, you have the Brat Pack in the 80s, and then you had like different versions of the Brat Pack in like the 90s. And then you had the Frat Pack in the 2000s. It's kind of interesting to see how they all sort of shifted and whatnot. Aaron says, hey. Minister of Darkness says, Cursed is a mess, but it's fun. Can't believe it's 20 years old. That's what really freaked me out. I'm like, oh my God, this movie is 20 years old. Like, I'm dying right now. I'm literally dying of old age. But yeah, Amy's here. Amy says Cursed is a fun movie. Yeah, it is fun. There is a Craven cut, apparently. There is a Craven cut of Cursed that incorporates that 90% of that footage. So here's what we need released immediately. We need the Schumacher cut of Batman Forever released. Give us that, and give us the Craven Cursed cut. As a movie overall, I mean, it's really goofy. There's a lot of goofy stuff in Cursed in what they reshot. It gets like really cartoonish in the same way that the Scream movies started to devolve. Like by the third Scream movie, which I love and I've defended endlessly on here, the third Scream movie gets very cartoonish, very goofy. There's some slapstick in there that's really goofy, and that sort of carries over into Cursed, which is not very far removed from Scream 3, right? And you know, it is a fun movie, man. It's a whodunit. It's a whodunit like Scream. They're doing who is the werewolf? Who's the one that cursed them in the first place? You know, there is so much potential, and the reason why you should watch it, not just because it's a Wes Craven movie, or not just because it really captures that time, the 2000s. Like, I really felt a very comforting sense of nostalgia while watching it. I will say the gay bashing stuff is so, like, first of all, it's so cringe in 2024 to watch this mainstream movie like have all this gay bashing. It did not age well. Obviously, it didn't age in the 80s. It most certainly didn't age in the 90s. And in the 2000s, it's like, and that's when it was at its, like, I think it was at its peak, I think, before the decline in the 2010s. I can't believe how fashionable this was and how accepted it was. And the idea, the sort of interesting, like, Colonel, that Milo's character who's making fun of Jesse Eisenberg for being gay. He's not gay, but he's making fun of him for being gay and using it as this pejorative. It turns out that he himself is gay. And so I guess that's for what it's worth. I don't know if that makes it better even. I don't know if that's a good thing either, but it's very dated, very, very dated. And so that's kind of interesting to sort of look at. And that's why, like, sometimes movies are like time capsules. You know, you not only are you watching them, but you're unlocking like a vibe, and you're remembering it. You're going, whoa, yeah, dude, that was a vibe, you know, that was a time, like a time. And here's the other thing. Here's the weird thing about it. The way that they're dressed, primarily, like the way that they're dressed in the movie, it's almost kind of not timeless, but there are certain moments where you kind of feel like you could be watching a movie that happened 5 years ago or 3 years ago. You know what I mean? Unlike the 80s or the 90s where like things, I mean, even in the 90s, like there's a lot of like 90s wardrobe, not all 90s wardrobe stuff. It's funny. My friend Jack, who just said this on Instagram, he's like, in the 90s, weird was mainstream. And that's so true. And so you get a lot of weird sort of fashion choices in the 90s. But like, I feel like really for the last 20 to 25 years, like obviously fashion has changed, but some of fashion has not changed. some of the fashion has not changed, and it almost feels like interchangeable in terms of like decade and year and time. And, I don't know. It's interesting to me. Amy says, I like how Jesse used his werewolf strength to out wrestle his bully. Yes. And what's interesting, Amy, what I was saying before, that's one of those scenes that they reshot. That's one of those scenes that they totally reshot that. And his hair is different. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, everybody should go watch Cursed. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because, like I said, I love Wes Craven. I love the Scream movies. And I understand, if you understand what Cursed is, if you know that Cursed is a flawed, bad movie, when you go in, you can watch it and actually find intrinsic good in it. Like, you can enjoy if you can enjoy it for what it is, you're going to have a good time. That's the bottom line. And you can see how cut to shit it is. You can see it down to like the different frames and the different shots that they're using, and how that story was really pulled together in the edit. Like, in the actual edit, you could tell when a story is being rewritten in editing, is what I'm trying to say. Like, there's some stuff that's rewritten during production. There's some stuff that's rewritten during the script form, but you can tell when they shot something to be one way, but then they edited it in another way, so that way it changed the story. And you can see that in a variety of places, particularly because now they're brother and sister, when in reality they were not brother and sister in the original version. So that's Cursed for you. Cursed was, in fact, cursed.